Welcome back to Between the Silos, where we talk about sales and marketing alignment and why so many companies struggle with it. I'm joined by Bill Mills. Bill is the CEO of Executive Group Incorporated, a CEO, business owner, peer group organization, which I'm part of. Bill is also the creator of the Leadership Process, a new-to-the-world approach to drive productivity, employee engagement, and profits. Thank you, Bill, for joining me.
Thank you, Jen. Happy to be here.
Yeah, really excited to have you. I'm excited to dive into our topic today. I've seen you use the term power over versus power with when it comes to leadership situations. So we're going to unpack that a little bit more later, but I'm hoping that you can start by giving the listeners an explanation of what you mean when you say that.
Well, I actually learned that term from one of my mentors, Dr. Bob Terry, and he was fascinated with authenticity and power. Actually, he actually figured out a way to diagnose what was going on in an organization, and he said, if you're ever confused, it's power. And so, spending time with him, getting to understand his approach, he talked a lot about: are we creating power with relationships, power over, or power under? And it's really only power with, true collaboration, where you can build the best performing teams and get the most out of people. And they love it too. People love to collaborate. They don't want to be one down in a relationship.
That's awesome. Tell me a little bit about, like you said, there's authenticity and power. Are you saying that those are like, it's either or, they don't go together?
Well, I mean, I suppose if we were going to take a weird analogy, Adolf Hitler was authentic, but I don't know that that's what we're looking for. There's an authenticity to leadership, but also there is an empathy and a compassionate element. If I don't fundamentally care about you, I don't think those are the best leaders. I think take an example from military, but do you want to follow a leader that doesn't care if you die? Mm-hmm. But you'll happily die for that leader that was doing everything they can to keep you safe.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about it that way. So tell me a little bit then, I'm sure you've come across many leaders and many of these of where they fall differently. So I'm hoping you can give me a little story about someone you've coached and creating through those different leadership styles, and then, what's happening and how does it show up? How do you know which one you are showing up with?
Sure. Well, it's hard to think of a perfect example, because I think we slip in and out of power over all the time as leaders. And it's not that there's anything malicious in our intent. It's just, I think we've kind of brought up that way. If you think about power struggle and power structure, you're born into a family and your parents have more power than you. And then you go to school and the teachers have, and then the police have, and the politicians have, and the government have more power than you. And so everywhere we look, we see this power structure. But then hopefully in your family, in your love relationship, in your very best healthy work relationship, it's a pure collaboration, and it isn't power over. Then it's power with. So I mean, there are times where I slip into power over because I'm frustrated with something, and I don't, darn it, I want my way, and then you have to kind of catch yourself. Well, what am I doing? Do I want to be right, or do I want to be successful? And if I want to be successful, then it isn't about being power over. You can't sustain a power over, power under relationship indefinitely. At some point, the tyrant gets overthrown.
So true. I was just on the phone with somebody today, and we were kind of talking about a similar topic and about a leadership style. And they were talking about they're kicking off a planning meeting, and this particular leader was kind of setting the stage with maybe a little fear, maybe a little, it was all, when you say power over, it was all power over moves. Yeah. And I think that a lot of times the more leadership you get, the more power over you maybe just apply without even knowing it. Like in this instance, I'm like, I don't think he has any awareness that he is in a power over state. Do you see that a lot?
Well, Yes, I think so. I'm not sure that it is as you get higher up the ladder in business, you tend to default to follow. I think some people, that's how they get there. They just steamroll people.
Mm-hmm.
And I have met people who I think, how in the world did you ever get this role? And I'm thinking of one particular person from a company that shall not be named, who it was a common occurrence for people to leave his office crying.
Wow.
Um, and 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 I've had the opportunity to work for really cool companies like 3M and Emation and Bonta and Best Buy. And as great as those companies perform, internally there are some really interesting politics that kind of, that are antithetical to human flourishing. And I think part of that is because when you get into a large structure, you tend to get more, maybe authoritarian is the right word for
Mm-hmm.
it, more command and control. Um, but long term, that's why people leave those organizations and often find a lot more happiness and success in smaller companies where, we're just a little more real with one another, and we don't have the politics and the power structure to worry about.
I think you teed me up perfectly for why isn't this easier, right? Like we know we know that it's important. We hear about it all the time. We talk about culture and we talk about breaking down silos and collaboration. And it's like it seems known and obvious, but I think it still happens quite a bit. And so why do you think it is not easier for and I agree with you that you slip in and out of that. I find myself, and there are triggers where you slip in and out. Like you said,
Oh yes.
frustration is certainly for me. I know a trigger, or like pace is a trigger that I can slip into that really quickly. So, why do you think it is not easier though?
Well, I'd look at it a couple of ways. So the first is psychologically and emotionally. So that frustration, and the definition of frustration is I feel like I should be farther along than I am, right?
Mhm.
So whether that's pace or somebody drops the ball or there was an expected activity a person was supposed to take and they didn't take that, all of that creates frustration and stress. And when we are under stress and under pressure, suddenly our amygdala kicks in, our fight or flight. And so fight, kicks into power. And that's just a natural response. It's a primal response to, I feel like I should be farther along than I am right now, and I'll get angry. And um, so that's one of the challenges is do we interpret the breakdown as there's something wrong with this other person, or is there something wrong with the process that got us to this breakdown? If we're able to emotionally step back and go, our process is what's not working, not the other person, then you can collaborate with the person to fix the process. That's power with fix the process. And that just takes some insight and practice, and just sort of conditioning yourself to, okay, it's the process, it's not the person.
Uh-huh, right? Tell yourself that over and over. So
Yeah.
how, how do you do that when you're meeting with people? Like what is your framework or coaching to get people, one, maybe aware of it, and two, like through it, if that's even possible, or just like a constant awareness?
Well, I have an advantage in that when you coach an executive, I'm pretty much in observing mode.
Mm.
I don't have a dog in their fight, and so I can notice that they are triggered and I notice that they are frustrated. And you can just ask questions about, sort of open-ended questions that open them up to the source of the frustration. And so as a coach, it's not that hard.
Mhm.
But as we both said in the moment, the, the dog is pulling at your pant leg when you're trying to have a conversation on the Zoom call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
um, that's just an automatic. It's very difficult to control that. But over time, I think you get better.
Yeah, I imagine you do. And so when you coach people, do you think that the bringing it to their attention and hearing about it just like just naturally helps you be aware and then shift that?
Yeah, absolutely. a good coach, and I'm not saying I'm a great coach or anything, but I think when I do a good job, I'm holding up a mirror and people can see, oh, that's what that looks like.
Mm-hmm.
You know, very often the thing that is irritating me about another person is some aspect of my own, I'll just say personality, that I haven't come to grips with. I see somebody and I go, wow, they're so arrogant, and then what's the next thing? Boy, I bet they think they know everything. Well, they don't know everything. I know stuff they don't know. Well, all of a sudden, I'm the arrogant one, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's that whole idea that when I'm pointing at you, there's three fingers pointing back at me, and that's called the shadow in Jungian psychology. And often, what is irritating us about others is the unaccepted aspects of ourselves. I haven't come to grips with my own arrogance, and so when I see it in somebody else, and my subconscious brings it to my attention in a negative way, that is supposed to be a gift. But like, hey, Bill, that's what it looks like when you do that. Like, oh, that's the learning thing. And again, if you're willing to explore that, you can get a lot farther. But um, it often our gifts taken to excess become our weaknesses. Confidence becomes arrogance. My attention to detail becomes paralyzed by analysis, right? There's all sorts of wonderful things that taken to an extreme hold us back. And I think a lot of times as leaders, our desire to get things done, and we are known for getting things done. And then when things aren't getting done, suddenly um, that's now we're triggered.
Yeah.
So,
You
so
said
that's
something
one
that
step
really
process.
struck a chord of like, um, it's the holding up the mirror and then having the person on the receiving end willing to look in that mirror and explore that conversation. And so, my ask for you is for listeners who are meeting with people like that. How do you do that? How do you have that conversation? It's different for you in a coaching seat, I realize, but like, do you have
Yeah.
any advice for people that are maybe experiencing that power with kind of, or power over, and like, how do you help somebody get
Yeah.
through that and be willing to explore that?
Well, I'll share my own kind of progress through that. I years ago I went to like the early '90s, 30 some years ago. I went to a 2 or 3 day workshop, and the leader of that workshop really challenged us to ask this question: what is it within me that's evoking this response? So, if I'm irritated with you or if I'm happy with you, if, what is it within me that's evoking that response? And, you know, it's the idea that the one thing I can control is what I'm thinking, and what I'm thinking impacts what I'm feeling. If I think this should be happening, I feel one way and I act, in a way that's in accordance with that. Like the sun should be shining today because I have a picnic, but then it shouldn't be raining. But if it is raining, now I'm frustrated or angry. But why would I be? I mean, it should be raining. I mean, because that's the atmospheric pressure. Those, you know, and and if you take that one step farther, Jen should be Jen and Bill should be Bill, and they should process the world the way they process the world. And so when they come to a conclusion and they act accordingly, they should be behaving the way they are. And if I don't think that the way they're behaving is useful, why get frustrated about that when what's really has to happen is we need a different conversation, so that the definition of persuasion is basically the art in giving person a reason to change. So if I'm going to persuade you to behave differently, which is what leadership ultimately is about, to inspire and persuade and influence behavior, then we have to have a conversation, and I have to understand you well enough to find out where your natural motivations and interests and how you perceive the world, how that lines up with what we're trying to create in my organization, because then you will voluntarily change your behavior. Whereas if I just come in with a hammer, now I'm back to power over, and you might comply.
Mm-hmm.
But
So
the
back
old
to the why isn't it easier? Like that totally makes sense. And I'm like, is it because that the act of doing just what you explained is like, one, you have to have some level of self-awareness,
Yeah.
and why you feel that. And then two, you have to like remove that and then understand and spend enough time and get honest enough with the other person to really like deeply understand, like you said, motivations, how they perceive the world, how what you're trying to get them to see or do. And sometimes I feel like both of those take a really long time and a lot of introspection to do,
Yeah.
and so sometimes that's why maybe it gets missed.
Well, yeah, and it's just easier in that moment to say because I said so,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
How dare you? I'm your boss. How dare you question my authority? And when we go into power over, because Socrates said that the unexamined life is not worth living, but I can tell you, it's it's slower.
Yeah. Right. For sure. It is slower. And you probably get further in the end, but it does feel, and I as you're saying these things, I can relate to some of them where you are like, I don't have time for this. I don't have time to do all of these,
Yeah.
one, understanding myself, and two, understanding where you're coming from, because we need this thing to move forward.
So think about that. I don't have time for that. That's the thought. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't have time for this BS or whatever, because you'll typically add a label to it, right? I don't have a time, and really, BS stands for belief system, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't have time for your belief system. Would be an interesting way to think about the BS, but I don't have time for it. That thought, that belief about the stimulus that you're experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
I'll just call it a stimulus. That belief that I don't have time for this, this shouldn't be happening, this isn't worth my time, this is ridiculous. Oh, any sentence like that, any belief you have about that, that creates an emotion, and then
Mm-hmm.
you have a correlated response. And that emotion is frustration or anger or disgust or pick a negative emotion. And then how do you behave when you feel emotion a negative? Well, that's typically where you go into fight or flight or avoid.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So but it's the thought that it shouldn't be happening. And one of my other mentors, a dear boy, powerful mentor, was Larry Wilson, who created Wilson Learning and Take Up the Learning. And uh, when I was complaining to him about an invoice I got from an attorney that I didn't believe I deserved, because we were just having a conversation and he was billing me and I thought we were having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
He said, Bill, you're upset because you're arguing with reality. Of course you could have gotten that invoice. So how could I could have? Well, because you did. Because the forces that would have prevented it from coming weren't sufficient enough to prevent it. And the forces that in play to cause it to happen happened. So however it happened, it should have happened because it did happen. It's
Right.
reality. You're arguing with reality. You're saying reality shouldn't be reality. It's like, oh, geez, Larry, you're killing me.
Ha, that's really deep. Actually, like the mental thoughts to think about all those things is, probably takes a feat, at times, right?
Well, and the fun part of that story is after I calmed down, I sent a note to the attorney. And I said, hey, did you mean to send me that invoice for $1,000? Because I thought we were just having an initial conversation. And his reply was, oh, ignore that. Sorry about that. My secretary just goes through my calendar and bills everybody I talk to. And
Huh.
I now there's a part of me that goes, yeah, right. But
Right.
um,
Uh-huh.
anyway, but the but when we argue with reality, I mean, we lose every time. Reality is always going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can get to this, it's almost like this place of acceptance and in the moment acceptance that what is happening, and to pretend that it shouldn't happen or to suggest that it shouldn't be happening completely distracts us from what needs to happen to move forward. So,
Yeah, I
um,
like that.
for you, ask why is it difficult? Well, that's just the emotional side. Now, then there's the structural side too. It's difficult to get past some of the power over stuff because there are power structures that are designed into our organization. We call them silos, but they and fiefdoms, or whatever you want to call them. But we design organizations in such a way, typically with a hierarchy. No offense to all the EOS practicum people out there, but we're trained that okay, you got sales and marketing, you got operations, you got customer service, whatever, and all those are silos and it's designed that way. But that work doesn't come through the organization from the top down. It comes in through the side. It comes in through marketing efforts and then sales efforts, and then it hits maybe engineering and design, possibly if you're a manufacturing company, and then it hits operations, and somewhere in there it hits customer service, and all this. It eventually hits finance and billing. It comes through horizontally. The way work flows through an organization is not the way the organization is uh, conceptualized. We conceptualize it as this is my area, this is your area, but work has to flow through the areas. And so we have these things called dotted line accountability. Well, there should be no dotted line. Dotted line is you designing frustration into your organization. Here's an example. Uh, the the manufacturer head of operation, head of manufacturing wants to have a meeting with sales because sales is outstripping their capacity. Can the operations tell sales to slow down and stop selling? Can sales tell operations put on an extra shift? Well, wait, who has the authority to manage the workflow? Because they're all managing their own workflow. They're not managing the company's workflow. It isn't designed that way. So you build that structural friction in, and then and that's what creates stress. Is when we say, well, this shouldn't be, operations shouldn't be holding back my sales because I get a commission on how much I sell, right?
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. You're like, you're naturally building it in that way. And then you add the emotional piece on top of it. And
Yeah.
it's no wonder.
Yeah. What's interesting is in 1998, Michael Hammer wrote a book called Re-Engineering the Corporation. He talked about this 30 years ago. And we haven't learned.
Well, I don't know what it says in there, but I'm now really curious. So what's the best way?
Well, Michael Hammer would say the best way is you design the ideal process that maximizes, the value to the customer and to the organization, and then you then you design the organization around the core process. What we do is we start off with a predetermined structure, and we try to fit a process into a pre-existing structure, and we don't identify the handoffs between departments and who can say yes and who can say no, who has the authority and who has the responsibility for success. I mean, you could take your existing structure and just by having really candid conversations with leaders, you could assign the authority and the accountability and make all the dotted lines into solid lines. Nobody does that, but you could. Or you could take Michael Hammer's approach and say, maybe we should design this around the customer. I mean, what a concept. What process flow would create the best experience for the customer? And then we'll design an organization and roles and responsibilities that support that. That that's the fundamental shift in thinking.
Yeah, that's really insightful, and I'm certainly reading that book because I do think you sort of get in this flow of how it's supposed to be, air quotes, or how it is, and then it breaks, but you're not entirely sure how should it flow. But if you bring it back to the basics of how do you maximize value for your customer? How does the work flow? That makes a lot of sense.
Well, and we have examples of this. Disney, Liz Carlton. Everything starts with the customer and ends with the customer. So, what does the customer want? What's the job they're trying to get done? And how do they want to feel? that's the piece we often miss in business is what does the customer want to feel while they are working with your organization and consuming your product or service? And it's not what you want them to feel about you, it's what they want to be feeling and experiencing as they go through your process. So when Disney says, "Hey, we're the happiest place on earth," um, that
it's designed for customers.
Yeah, it's designed so that the customer feels happy all the time. And so nothing is left to chance, and they design the customer experience from the exit, from the time they pull onto the parking lot until the time they leave.
Right.
And then they create processes to ensure that those happy things are happening.
I love that. So powerful. And I think it sort of took a bit of a pivot, but it really doesn't. It aligns with our conversation, is that power conversation, because I think it shows up because of how some of the systems are designed.
Oh yeah. Yeah, your organization is perfectly designed to give you the results you currently experience.
Mm-hmm.
That's Pete Senge from the Fifth Discipline in the early 1990s when he wrote that book. Your organization is designed to have stress and frustration and people yelling at each other. Mm-hmm. And sales is designed to be upset with marketing, and marketing is designed to be upset with operations, and operations is designed to be upset with finance, because we designed it that way. Mm-hmm. So
powerful.
So actually, that's why in our peer group, so often, when a person is hosting the conversation about their company, it starts off with, your organization is designed to give you these certain opportunities and these certain constraints. And if you want something different, that's where leadership steps in, and you have to reconceptualize the offering and the business.
I love it. Thank you. Are you ready for our final spot about the hot seat?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. I got a few questions for you in the hot seat. Would you rather coach a micromanager or someone who's completely hands off?
It doesn't matter, because they both suffer from the same problem, and the problem is they are managing people the way they personally like to be managed. So that wouldn't matter to me.
Good answer. Early riser or night owl? When do you do your best thinking?
Once upon a time I was probably a morning guy. Now I know how to turn it on whenever I need it. I've been doing this long enough. It doesn't matter.
A little more fluid. Okay, good. That's interesting. Let's see. Last question. Spreadsheets or whiteboards when solving complex problems?
Whiteboard, and I have to be the one holding the marker. I'm a recovering engineer, and I can't think without a pen in my hand. I have to be writing while I'm thinking.
Okay. So even if you're not at the whiteboard, do you have to have the pen in your hand for like?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. I write everything down, and then I throw away the paper, but my brain needs the writing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, it anchors it. It just helps. It's a way to think.
It is. Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you, Bill, so much for joining me. It was super valuable. I appreciate all your insights on how leadership can, build bridges and create barriers also, depending on sort of how you approach them.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. It's a fun conversation. Thank you.
And for all the listeners out there, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you always know when a new episode lands. Until then, don't forget, the best things to happen to your team will always happen between the silos.